very much, Sophia, and welcome to all of you in the room. I'm happy to talk to you for a few minutes about a massive topic, which I will not be able to justice to, I can say already. But what my purpose here really is to give you a glimpse of the reasoning behind what I think is one of the most encompassing and far-reaching reform movements, transdisciplinary reform movements, going through science in the last couple of decades, I would say, which is the open science, open research, open scholarship movement, with a particular focus on one aspect of it, which is an increasing move towards making research workflows more open and particularly more transparent. So I will talk about why in why in the first place should we be interested in this? Why has this reform movement come about? Why is it in the world? Because I mean, rather than just talking to you about everything that it means, it might be more important for you, especially if you're new to it, to get a good understanding of, well, why has it come about in the first place. So I'll talk about the problems that open research and open research workflows address, and then I'll also indicate or point towards some solutions, some practices that the reform movement has come up with so far that can be adopted directly by you yourself as a researcher, and that you should be aware of as you plan your research projects and bake into your research workflows and timelines, if at all possible, in my view. So yeah, a little bit about me. Sophia has introduced me quite nicely already. I'm a lecturer in politics and media, but I'm also very active in the wider open research movement. And here are just a couple of the sort of open research affiliated organizations that I've come to work with and in. So I won't talk about each of these, just the slide is supposed to give you an idea of the diversity of the open research ecology at this point, after several years of this reform movement having gained steam. In the social sciences, which is my sort of specific turf, there are multiple associations that cater to this particular discipline, and I would encourage you all to seek out those equivalent organizations within your own broader field yourself to sort of get hold of the discipline-specific reform discourses, open research discourses that are held, I'm sure, in your discipline, regardless of what it is. I will highlight here the logo in the center, which is the UKRN logo. UKRN stands for UK Reproducibility Network, of which for which I'm the Leeds local network representative, a local network lead, as it were. We'll get back to that particular association at the very end, but that's one that you might want to be particularly aware of. Okay, so here's for a start what some would consider a founding document of the open research movement as a whole, and especially with a focus on open research workflows, the Manifesto for Reproducible Science, published in Nature Human Behavior only some 5 years ago, but very impactful publication that I would encourage you to seek out, published coincidentally as first author by the founder of UKRN, Marcus Munafo as well. This is just for you to sort of perhaps seek out and have a look at, because it really goes more deeply into some of the issues I will talk about in this talk. So what is open science? What is open research? What is open scholarship? As I said already, it's an encompassing and multifaceted phenomenon, way too complex for me to fully do justice to here. And here's an overview that a taxonomy that people at the EU-funded Foster Plus project have come up with, that gives you an appreciation, I think, of the diversity and many components of open science, open research. I will only talk specifically about the open reproducible research component here, and even that I can't do fully. So what's behind that move towards open and transparent research workflows, you may ask, because if you spend a lot of time learning about it and getting to hear about all the fuss about it, you will probably want to know what that fuss is all about. I think a good way, and there are multiple ways in which you can look at this and multiple perspectives on it, but one frame that I think captures the essence of what this is all about quite nicely is one of thinking about the ideals and the reality of actually practiced research that we engage in. So here's an excerpt from a study published already 15 years ago by Anderson et al., which juxtaposes academic norms and counter norms, six of them specifically, four of which are the so-called Mertonian norms, which you might be familiar with, of communality, universalism, disinterestedness, and organized skepticisms of how science of research should normatively be run and conducted, right? It should be communal, scientists should openly share their findings with colleagues, it should be universal, and that the scientists evaluate research only on its merit, they should be disinterested, and so on. You might not fully agree with each of these norms, but they are sort of a standard, let's say, mainstream conception of what good and proper science should look like. So these are the six norms and six counter norms. What did Anderson et al. Do in their study? Well, they surveyed early and mid-career researchers in the US in order to let them indicate whether they think these norms, or first of all, what they think about these norms, what they think others do with regard to these norms, and what they think they themselves are doing in their own research work with regards to these norms. And here's what they find. In short, if you look at these three brackets, so each of these three brackets distinguishes between the results for mid and early career researchers. So the first bracket here, the first two rows, are subscription to the norms and counter norms. The second batch here is concerns researchers' own perceived behavior, and the third one is the perceived behavior of other researchers. So what you see there is, when it comes to subscription to these norms and counter norms, most researchers in both groups, early and mid-career, actually subscribe more to the norms than to the counter norms. That's fairly unsurprising. This is the proportion of researchers who are equally subscribing and not subscribing to those norms, to the norms and counter norms. And here, this is the proportion of researchers highlighted or valuing the counter norms more than the norms of good scientific work. Now, as you can see, most subscribe to the classical norms. Most of them also think that they adhere to them themselves very much in their own work, but a little less than they would like to, apparently, because there's a gap between subscription and actual behavior to the norms and actual behavior. And then most strikingly, most early and mid-career researchers think that others in their field do not regularly adhere to the norms of good scientific practice, right, to those Mertonian norms. So there is a clear discrepancy between the ideals of research and the at least perceived reality of how it's being done. The open research movement and this movement towards making workflows transparent and open, in part at least, I think can be understood as an effort to minimize that discrepancy and to get us closer again in our practices to our ideals. And so that's the broad prelude to this entire concern about open research workflows. Now, being open means three things at least. It means being open towards yourself about the work that you do, being open towards your peers and in your research community, and being open towards society. I will also say, this is an article that I recently published in my field on this very topic. It means two things that are related but distinct, which is you need to be openness means being open for epistemic reasons, which is being open, transparent about your workflows, what you did in your work. But it also means being open for social moral reasons, so being inclusive in your work and inviting people to actually participate in various means. Just to clarify our understanding of openness here. Now, the first central theme that I would like to propose to you here is that we have a problem. We've already hinted at it when we saw that discrepancy between ideals and reality. or perceived reality. And you can summarize this with in the form of a clash between the things that many researchers think they need to do to advance their career and the things that we need to do to advance research. Right? So that's the problem we're trying to address. We try to increase that overlap between these two things by being more open. And hopefully that'll get us closer to solving this problem. How large it is, that's also a matter of a lot of work around open research, and there has been quite a bit of an upsurge in meta research, so-called meta research, that tries to see how big the problem is, how big is the discrepancy in practice, and what can we do to solve it. This is what I will talk a little bit about at the very end of my brief talk here. Now, just briefly, this is a massive literature again, but I'll give you some pointers as to where we stand with regards to our knowledge about the trustworthiness of research findings, broadly speaking. Of course, each field has its own peculiarities when it comes to this, but there are some broad trends that we can see in multiple fields. So one take in general within the open science and open research discussions is that credible research findings can be understood, this is from the Bell et al. 2018, as those that have survived risky attempts at being proven wrong. So that's a general guiding idea that you can follow when it comes to assessing the credibility of research. Now, the Bell et al. Proposed 4 different types of criteria for assessing research credibility in a pyramid of research credibility, starting from method and data transparency. So that's what open research workflows are all about. To analytical reproducibility, that's also what they are about, and to analytical robustness and replicability. I won't talk about each of these 4 in detail, but that's just for you to show that there is an appreciation of the direct relation between research openness and research credibility. So method and data transparency includes falsifiability, the ability of others to find errors and improve your own research, and to ultimately for us all collectively to be able to engage in cumulative science. The reality, however, often is that in achieving this type of transparency is a lot of work. Mistakes can become public, which can be embarrassing or perceived to be embarrassing, and it might put you at a competitive disadvantage because of that, the time that it costs you to ensure that transparency. Now, however, we actually do find that there is a real need for us to all do better collectively when it comes to that transparency. Here's just a few exemplary research findings. For example, we see in political science that the majority of studies published in that field provide no data and no syntax of analytical code. 3 out of 10 hyperlinks to data published along with published research are actually dead links, so don't work at all. And the very familiar sort of clause of data being available upon request or in actual empirical research is shown to not often leads to actual actions on the part of authors, because only a minority of authors asked to actually provide their data do so, even if they have included that particular statement in their published work. So we need to, however, recognize that there's a little bit of a turning tide here, and mandatory data and method transparency are slowly becoming standard, not least standard practice, not least as a result of the pressure by funders, as we've heard earlier. So this is the method and data transparency. Analytical reproducibility means that findings should follow from the data, quite simply, of published work. And again, that's a lot of work. There's, again, a low risk of being caught if you don't do it. So that's pushing against this, realizing the standard. But again, research shows that even for journals with dedicated reproducibility procedures, many studies turn out not to be reproducible. That's a problem, of course. And only 1 out of 3 studies included in a meta research study by Stockhammer et al. Were found to actually provide data and code that reproduce the main finding reported in the paper, which is quite staggering as well. So we need to invest in dedicated reproducibility procedures more. Replicability and analytical robustness have more to do with the quality of the work that you actually do. So I'll skip over that just for the sake of time, but just so you know that this is sort of the pinnacle or the peak of the credibility pyramid. One big problem with regards to the work that we do, for example, is the credibility of the work that is being published is that problem of publication bias, where, as I'm sure many of you will know, it has been shown that many null results of research are never written up and never published, which of course is a problem when it comes to assessing our research as a whole. Here's a holistic depiction of various threats to reproducible science following a model of the hypothetical deductive understanding of the scientific method. You do see various risks at various steps of an ideal scientific research process highlighted here in red. I won't go into these in detail, but again, just to give you an appreciation of open research workflows being in the world in order to address each and every one of these different various problems that have been shown in the literature that is shown here to be a real problem for the kind of work that we do, and again, to close that gap between ideals and reality and minimize those problems. Because in the end, ultimately publication bias and QRPs, which is short for questionable research practices, collectively endanger the credibility of the research that we do. Right? Either collectively as a whole in the case of publication bias, or even within single studies in the case of QRPs. Now, one exemplary open research innovation that I want to point out here is only one of many that I encourage you to familiarize yourself with, is a journal publication format called the registered report, which essentially is a combination of a pre-registered study plan with a results-blind peer review, which means that you develop your idea, you design a study, and you then get it out for peer review, and you hopefully get a positive review of your research plan, which comes with a in principle acceptance for the publication of your study, if you are to follow your research plan, just carry it out the way you planned. You then go and collect and analyze the data, write your report. This is then checked again for consistency with your original study plans, and then this is published without any further questions. So that's, of course, minimizing publication bias and increases the transparency of what it is that you wanted to do and actually did as well. Just one example of a particular journal publication format that addresses these issues in an open way and increases transparency. Journals offering registered reports as a publication format have grown in number. As you can see here, this ends in 2018. I guess the trend will just have accelerated since. So I encourage you to seek out the respective journals in your field that offer registered report, and strongly consider to go with registered reports as a publication type for your next publication of your research results. There are, of course, competing considerations regarding research transparency, which I'll skip over in the interest of time as well a little bit here. But you know, of course, you will need to think about the personal, the public implications and all public considerations, and as well as the research implications and practical considerations, all of which, of course, can lead you to your very own position vis-a-vis the practices that you will and can engage in for your own work. So some general open research practices just for me to hint at here are to track down, as I already said, the open science, open research discussion in your field. One idea for you to follow is to just use the open research across disciplines primer that I've linked here, which gives an overview of various pieces of publications discussing open research in different disciplines. So that's a great way to start for you to get more into the open research and open research, open workflows, research workflows discourse. Collaborate with others as much as possible. Open research has also included a push towards a greater engagement in team science. For example, the framework for open And reproducible research training, sport for short, is one great community to find people to collaborate with there. Train your own open science skills, develop them as much as possible, I would say, because that's definitely practicing open science, as you've just heard previously, is more and more demanded, not only by funders, but also by journal reviewers. So it's the ship, the direction the ship is sailing into. You may want to be ahead of the curve a little bit and be able to sort of do research that conforms to these standards earlier rather than later. You should incentivize open research practices yourself where you can, where you're in a position to, of course. Pre-register studies, submit registered reports, as I already said. Adopt reproducible workflows, which can mean anything, including publication of your materials, data, code, or even Shiny apps, interactive online applications, which allow people to play around with your data in an interactive way. You can adopt open reporting standards, and you can, of course, also become an open reviewer. Check out the peer reviewers openness initiative for that. There are specific inflections of the drive towards openness in different disciplines. I just want to flag that here, that if you listen to this talk and you are a qualitative researcher, you use qualitative methods, and you find yourself wondering whether you can actually apply any of this, the answer is yes, you can. But it's going to take a particular approach to it. And there have been sort of contributions in the literature. Again, try to seek these out or ask me if you want to have some pointers for how you can do open using qualitative methods. And the same is true for quantitative methods as well, even though openness might be more immediately plausible from that perspective anyway. So here are some learning resources that I want to point you towards the end of my talk here. Do check these out if you want to build your own open research skills. And as a very first practical step, if you are at Leeds, you can please join us at the UK Reproducibility Network at Leeds, just by clicking the logo or just asking me for the link to join. Thank you very much.